Hello, welcome to the Brád-Cast, episode 7. My name is Anthony Brady, and today we are going to have a little conversation about reporting. It's probably WFM reporting to be a bit more specific. So this is a topic I think is hugely important, as are all the WFM topics really. But yeah, I wanted to I've drafted up a few notes here that I'm going to try and walk you guys through, and hopefully you'll find this a little bit interesting. So where I wanted to start today is to let me kind of rewind a tiny bit there. The genesis for today's episode is actually picking up on something I probably hinted or suggested at before, which in a previous episode, which was around this idea that no one really cares about what WFM are doing until it goes wrong, and then suddenly everyone is like, they want to know all the minutiae detail and all the kind of lovely information that WFM produce every single day, every single week, that largely kind of floats over a lot of people's heads that no one really wants to listen to. Suddenly they are interested in, and so I'm going to dig into that idea a little bit more detail today, because of course it manifests itself profoundly in the world of reporting. There's no easier way for an audience that's not directly connected inside WFM, that when they see operational gaps or problems, or performance, something has gone wrong, even though I might argue that there's a very good chance that your WFM team have probably signposted the particular problem and probably warned you about the particular problem well in advance, but again, sometimes people don't always hear it, and they don't hear it or feel it until it's right up on top of them, and then it's like, oh my god, look at what's happening. And then it's like, and what they do often is, before they even go and have a conversation with anyone, they jump straight into those dashboards, they jump straight into the reports, and they start trying to piece it together for themselves, and they start building up a kind of an armchair detective style kind of case for the prosecution, right? As to and then comes can often then come the attack, right? So then WFM, a meeting is called, and it's like, okay, WFM, we were looking at this and we were looking at that, and I can see from this and I can see that, and then that situation, then it's very much the he says she says scenario, and it's not a nice place to be in, but it is very much a reality of being part of a contact center, being part of a customer service operation, and if you're inside WFM, it's something that I think most of us in WFM have experienced at one time or another. So let me tell you about reporting, and some of the truth and some of the kind of no holds barred about why it is the way it is, and kind of what kind of goes on around here, right? So let's start off with a great question, right? So who owns reporting? And again, I probably would have said this, I have a bit of an opinion that, reporting is a very, very broad term. However, inside a contact center operation, the amount of information that is directly sourced and connected to everything that goes on in the WFM space, it's not unusual that some organizations just end up deciding if you want to put the label on it, that the reporting function should probably reside inside WFM, and just like we've said before, we have people inside our WFM team who are tasked with being responsible for real-time management, or being responsible for forecasting or scheduling or whatever it might be. There too would also then therefore be somebody who's responsible for reporting, creating the reports, and to a certain degree talking to the reports. Okay, so and that's an important thing, right? So so what is reporting? Like, what is it, right? So what is a report, right? A report is information, data, information on a page, basically outlining some factual information, right? And you can have millions of these things, obviously, and I hope I don't need to kind of I don't want to insult anyone's intelligence, right? But you can have a report on just about anything. What was the average handle time? Then what was the average handle time for our market, or what was it broken down by agent? What was it by interval? What was it, and then you get this sort of, you often hear people using the phrase slice and dice, so if average handle time, let's just pick average handle time, right? If average handle time is the particular metric you're after, you might say, well, get me the AHT report, but then that AHT report might satisfy only one or two of what you have in mind, because what you really want to know is, what you really want to dig into is, it might be something very granular, like, I'm not necessarily interested in the overall AHT. I'm more specifically interested in what is the AHT on Tuesdays, or what is the AHT at the weekend versus the rest of the week, or what's the AHT of this particular team. So you get this sort of A/B kind of reporting, comparison reporting, and on and on and on and on. So so then reporting teams, or people who are tasked with reporting, can then, it's a whole industry then of spinning up, like, okay, I'm going to create reports, and you get into reports and dashboards that have the great drill down. So you'll have a report that starts at the top level, and then if you wish, you can kind of you can kind of just start breaking that down, drill down into by day, drill down to by person, by week, by month, whatever, and on and on and on. And that's what a report is, and that's just one metric. You could have a report then on shrinkage, a report on volume, occupancy levels, utilization levels, and on and on and on. There's a million KPIs out there, and you can have a report on and a dashboard on just about everything. So, and you could literally, if you kind of visualize this, you could think about it in terms of, like, you could fill up a library really of reports, most of which probably won't actually be looked at, right? They probably won't be looked at, and there's a phrase I wrote down here, which I'll come back to in a little while, which is a lot of this reporting tends to fall into the category of reporting for insurance purposes. It's like we don't necessarily need it we don't need it until we need it, right? That's the idea. But yeah, and then somebody somewhere is probably generating a lot of reports, and they're trying to categorize them, and they're trying to basically meet the particular audience's interpretation of what it is they need. And again, I'm going to come back to that point, because that's an interesting item all in itself. But coming back, trying to stick to my notes as carefully as possible today. So reports versus information. Yeah, now levels of reporting. Now, I thought about this, and I think this is true. If you think about it, reporting probably largely segments or divides itself up into three broad areas, right? So there's operational reporting, which is concerned around what is happening now, like what's going on right now, operational 101. How are we doing now? Then there's management reporting, right? Which is, well, why did it happen? That's the looking backwards stuff, right? Why did it happen? Okay, great. Somebody has a report and they say this happened, but now I want to know why. Was it bad planning? Was it underperformance? Was it technical issues? Was it all of the above? If so, to what degree? To what extent did everything contribute, etc., etc.? And then the final level of reporting that's out there is probably executive reporting, which is, for our lovely senior managers and CEOs and all that. And their reporting is generally, okay, well, what does it all mean? Great, somebody is able to tell me what happened. Somebody else can tell me, why it happened. But okay, great, put it all together and give me the message. Give me the, what does it all mean? Does it mean we need to hire more people? Does it mean we're not going to meet our budget this year? Does it mean, we have the wrong strategy in place? Do we, that's kind of what they're after. And there are reports that are, designed to meet their need. Now, the reporting I'd probably be most familiar with is the first two, really, right? The operation and management side of it. And And usually this sort of reporting takes place in the form of business review meetings, right? Now, I'm a big believer in business review meetings, certainly on a daily basis, to kind of, and I'll talk a little bit about kind of, how I think there's I've had a lot of experience with running daily business review meetings and what works well and what certainly does not work well. But then, of course, there are weekly business review meetings, monthly business review meetings, and then there are quarterly business review meetings, right? And they're often just referred to as WBRs, MBRs, and QBRs. But the daily one is a really, really important one, I think. Sometimes just called stand-up meetings as well, and they're not supposed to be big, involved productions at all. They're supposed to be quick and dirty information to just kind of have a very, very quick overview on what we believe happened most recently, as in i.e. yesterday, and the kind of big picture for today. So this is very so the reason I'm doing this is probably one of the main reasons why I'm doing this episode, coming straight off the back of the real-time management episode, because if you think about it, after the real-time management and everything we talked about on that last week, the next most logical thing then is that every single day we're going to start off our day with checking everyone's here and we're set up for the day. And a large part of that is having a review meeting where we all sit around and go, right, giving people that sort of, I don't know, the signals, the indicators as to, okay, guys, here's what we're actually looking at today. You should probably know there's been a ton of absenteeism, or you should probably know that, you remember those technical issues we were having yesterday? Well, they're still not resolved and they're going to continue on in today. So therefore they're probably going to impact everything today. And here's what we're thinking about doing to mitigate against that, etc., etc. So it's kind of like real-time management in meeting form. And there'll also be a little bit about kind of like talking about okay, not to kind of put anyone on the, not to try and put anyone on the spot or make anyone feel uncomfortable or squirm or anything like that, but we should probably try to start making an attempt at, if our performance yesterday was not where it should be, we should be starting to try to put the finger, maybe not on it, but the finger towards the direction of what that was about. The nitty gritty, the forensic stuff, that can come in the, a bit later in the weekly review or maybe even the monthly review, when, we'll really kind of get into it. But in the right here and now, if something went, if our performance, if our service level yesterday was just not where it was supposed to be, the WFM plans all indicated that yesterday should have been a 80% service level day, there or thereabouts, but it turned out to be a 50. I would be looking at that daily stand-up review meeting the next day to be kind of saying, right, indicators are that the smoking gun, let's say that the smoking gun would appear to be the volume. Yeah, we got, the big problem yesterday was there was a ton of volume, and we suspect that the reason for that extra volume was because of whatever it might be. There was a football game on that was not brought to the attention of our forecasting group or whatever it might be, or it could be anything, or it could have been, there might have been a political event or something like that, and that drove up volume. But we should be trying as much as possible the next day to try and put our finger in the direction of, we were really off, and here's what we think. And sometimes it might be, sometimes it might, and this is a kind of a skill in itself. Sometimes it might have to basically point at, it was a per performance day. Like the bottom line is we had it might be a situation where you're saying, well, guys, we did have the right number of people. The absenteeism levels weren't particularly bad, and we had everyone here. There wasn't an over delivery on shrinkage levels. The shrinkage levels actually looked okay for yesterday. Our volume was okay. Occupancy utilization levels, they all looked okay. And what you might be getting at is that, so all we're really left with is that the reason why we didn't achieve our goals yesterday would seem to be somewhere in the performance. Our average handle time was noticeably higher. So therefore, we just we didn't churn through enough phone call. We didn't answer enough phone calls. We didn't answer enough emails. And as a consequence of that, a lot of our customers then experienced higher abandon rates, longer average speed of answers, etc., etc., etc. I think it's important to state those things the next day and try to state them without apportioning. I think I'm terrible at that word, but distributing blame, right? It's just to kind of say what it is, and the reason being is that because, listen, what happened yesterday happened. Somebody else in a different forum, in a much more kind of carefully constructed environment, probably in a WBR, they can get into bring a lot more information, reports and dashboards to kind of really dig into that. But the purpose of today is we're only going to mention it because if it happened yesterday, there's a good chance it'll happen again today. And then, so this will be our opportunity then to kind of talk about, does anyone have a logical explanation as to why our performance fell off the page yesterday, and is that likely to continue today? Because our real-time management people will probably need to know, and we can make our decisions and we can make new, better decisions based on whatever we discuss. So anyway, that's they're the type of levels of reporting and the different forums that they go in. Now, I hinted about striking the right tone. This is something that I believe very strongly in, because I've been in organizations where review meetings can be a dread for almost everyone involved, because some people may choose to use those settings as I don't know, platforms to, I don't know, engage in a little bit of ego and displays of power, and kind of purposefully making people, like, whether it be team leaders, operational managers, whatever like that, purposely making people kind of squirm a little bit and wriggle, and it's not nice. I'm not a fan of using meetings to ask people questions where the answer is probably already factually known and understood, but we're using it as an opportunity to embarrass or make people feel unduly uncomfortable. I've seen that done, and when that happens, of course, what ends up happening is people they'll find 100 reasons to avoid the meeting at all costs. I have another meeting, and I'm sorry, a HR thing cropped up and I can't make it. That's what starts happening, and you don't want that. What you want is create a safe space, a safe environment where people know that if they come along, there might have been fault all around, but it's okay. We're not here to eviscerate anybody. We're not here to, make anyone feel unduly uncomfortable. That's not the point. The point is to simply just, can we find alignment? Can we find generally agreement as to this was the big picture problem yesterday? Great. And what do we think the consequence of that is going to be for today, as we try to kind of move through today and on into tomorrow and the whole lot. So, try to find, if you've got those meetings and what I'm describing sounds quite familiar, you're kind of thinking, oh yeah, God, everyone hates those review meetings, then maybe try to introduce that sort of scene setting, kind of safe space setting, it's not easy, certainly not easy, but it is amazing how productive and how fruitful those meetings can be if it's got the right tone associated to it. Anyway, I'm going to draw a line under that and move on now. So let me look at my notes. So coming back to this whole kind of where that people use reports as a method because no one cares about reports until something goes wrong. And I'd mentioned I don't know, about 10 minutes ago now, reporting as insurance. So it often gets debated. I've often heard people talking about this idea of like, if a report gets made, and it's not unusual for the people who make a report, produce a report, that they behind the scenes are they're looking at the reporting statistics behind it. So what that means is that the people who produce the report can see, I've made a report and it gets published every single day and it gets filed away here, or it's a dashboard or whatever, but I can actually see that particular report or dashboard is only getting accessed once a week, once a month, or this particular dashboard has not been looked at by a soul in 6 months, and yet we are here and we're, as a team, we are producing this particular dashboard. Now, so then this raises the question going, well, why are we doing it if no one is even looking at it? You might take the approach, or you might take the opinion then going, well, clearly no one needs this report, so does it really make any sense for us to spend any time or effort in producing a report that is evidently not important or used? You take it away, and then one day the excrement hits the fan, and suddenly people then go looking for that report. So what I'd say is that be aware that just because no one's looking at your report doesn't mean it's a bad report. It falls into this category of sometimes reports are made and filed away and are maintained quietly in the background as insurance, because there might come a day where something goes on, and then people will need to then dive into those reports and look back, and they'll be thankful for the fact that, like, okay, and then all of a sudden, if you're looking at those statistics, there could be like a flurry of activity. All of a sudden there's a whole audience now looking and analysing over that, because whatever's in that particular report is only relevant to help solve a problem, an investigation into something, so I quite like that idea of reports as insurance. But also sometimes reports are bad, right? So sometimes they're not great, and that's the reason why no one's looking at them. So I think it is important to when you have reports building up and being maintained, and it is important to kind of look at those reports critically and analytically, and kind of go, what's the reason why no one's looking at this report? And sometimes it might be, and don't be afraid to kind of go out there and ask your audience, that report, you never look at it. You'd be amazed at how many times people kind of will just tell you, I'll tell you why I never look at that report, because it's actually wrong. If you look carefully, the numbers it's saying or the numbers it's producing they're just flat out wrong. And you go, oh, okay, so just keep that in mind too. So then that leads me on to something about reporting, which is another thing I think has been interesting for me over the years. This idea of gatekeeping reports, right? So what is your process for actually getting a report created in the first place? So usually there's a reporting team or a person or something like that who is actually responsible for making these things. Now, it can go one of two ways. It could just be a case of like, you're new in the operation, or you've been in the operation a while, and you've got some ideas, and you've been thinking about, you're kind of you're mulling things over and trying to figure some stuff out. So you might make a request going, I would like a report that shows me occupancy levels broken out by market, but broken out this way, and maybe if I could get a view on by agent and whatever, and you'll come up with your, I'd like to see this, Then the important question at that point then becomes, should the report be created because somebody in the operation has asked for it? And that's it. We just do it. We just kind of get on with it and say, yeah, sure, no worries, leave it with me. It'll take me a day or 2 days to kind of create it, test it, and then give it to you. Should you go down that road of just saying, listen, you do you sort of thing, right? If you want it, here you go. Or do you get into the mode of saying, when somebody comes along like that and says, I'd like a report that shows me occupancy and this and that and the other, do you then kind of get in the way of that slightly by saying, why what are you doing? What are you trying to do? What's going on? And this sort of idea of like, well, if the person can satisfy my questions, if the person can explain to me clearly why they would want such a thing, then I will kind of deem it acceptable and go ahead and create it. But if they can't articulate, or if I point out to them that what they're actually asking for is, well, we actually have 4 other reports, or there's a dashboard over here that there's a dashboard that shows this, there's a dashboard that shows utilization, there's a different dashboard that shows something else. In fact, all of the information you've just asked for me is out there, just spread across different things. If that person is then saying, going, yeah, I know, I know, but I think it would be helpful if I could see these things all on one page for whatever. And again, the question comes, well, why? Why on earth do you want that? So here's a personal opinion, right? Sometimes people don't know fully what it is they want. And as a person who is a very inquisitive person anyway, myself, I would have been one of those people who would have asked for all the sort of harebrained reports and dashboards to be made, but I didn't know exactly what it was I was looking for. So as part of my own kind of being part of this business, being part of the company, being part of the organization, and I'm trying to understand if where there might be linkages and connections between things, and to try and improve something, you asking for that report, and then looking at it, that might be the spark or the motivation, or the motivation to then kind of go, oh, okay, and then you onto the next thing and onto the next thing. At which point what you've asked for now has now become redundant, and you can quickly be destroyed. But I would hate to be the person who gets in the way and stifle anyone's innovation. If a person is endeavoring to try and ask for a report to try and get to a better place, right? If they're trying to do their best and they're trying to do right by the customer and do all that good stuff, if that's the motivating factor, then why would you get in the way of that? You might roll your eyes and go, oh, I think this is a silly report to make, or this is a silly dashboard to make. But big picture, if by creating it, if it helps that individual to kind of evolve their thinking and evolve their thought process, that leads them to the next thing and the next thing, and ultimately leads them to something quite revealing and quite insightful that can then be shared. They'll probably go around and kind of say, hey, look what I figured out. I've figured out that there's a very, very strong connection or correlation between our absenteeism levels and this particular shift. Ergo, I would suggest that that particular shift, we should think about retiring that shift and introducing something different, because it might be something like that, and that's great. But we may never have found out that if we'd have gotten in the way of that with our gatekeeping right at the start, going, tell me why you need such a silly dashboard. No, I'm not doing that, because you haven't been able to fully form everything here. So that's another thing, right? So reporting, the gatekeeping aspect of it, and as I just kind of mentioned as well, this idea about our WFM, therefore, is their role when it comes to reporting. Are we librarians really in the great pantheon of all the reports and dashboards? WFM can sometimes feel like we are the librarians, right? Like, so when, as operational people, are kind of maybe thinking things through and kind of saying, I wonder this, I wonder that, usually your WFM people are probably the most familiar with all of the various reports and dashboards that are currently out there in the world, and they can be quite helpful in just kind of saying, well, hey, let me spend a bit of time with you to help show you and walk you through what this particular report that's already there can do. But then I've run into WFM people who are kind of, well, that's not my role, right? My role is not to train the operations people on how to interpret reports and stuff like that. So reporting can be it's a bit of a minefield, because it can often not be a very well defined area from all sorts of angles, down to who even owns reporting, what's it for, what are the rules around how we produce reports, all of that kind of. It's usually never very well defined, and what you're left with then are people's personalities. So depending on who's around the WFM space, or whoever it is that's been tasked with, reporting, or even some of the WFM or the operational leaders. Everyone's got their own personalities, everyone's got their own agenda, everyone's, and like I said, I'm not the political animal, but a lot of people are, putting your hands on the right report, or getting the right report, can be great material for someone who is a politically motivated person, what I mean by politically motivated is somebody who is first and foremost primarily interested in self-promotion, and how do I get me to higher levels within this contact center? How do I get, and it's not necessarily from a place of how do I improve what we're doing on behalf of our customer. That's what I mean. So that's reporting. This is the bit of the podcast I love where I say, let me look back over my notes. The executives. I'd mentioned about the earlier about the 3 levels, right? So the operation management, what's happening now, the management, and then there's the executive stuff. Executive reporting can be an almighty pain in the butt altogether, because often because here's my experience of executives, right, is that they're obviously brilliant. They got to where they are for a reason. That they've got strategic minds, all that kind of stuff. But I often find that it's very hard to interpret what executives are actually looking for. So when executives are saying, "Can you get me a dashboard that shows me this or shows me that," and often what ends up happening in that situation is because of the nature of the fact that they are indeed an executive or C-suite level or whatever. Of course, the answer is going to be yes. 99% of the time, people, person X has asked for something, I'm going to make it happen. I'm not even going to think about, whether I'm going to make it happen. But that can be incredibly frustrating though, because, executives sometimes can, they start asking for stuff, and then they'll come back, and then they'll come back, and then they'll come back, and eventually what's screaming in the back of your head or in the back of your mind is, oh dear God, just tell me what it is you're trying to figure out here, will you? Just what is it you're really, really trying to get at? Just tell me, and I might be able to help you. Stop beating around the bush. Stop kind of asking me like, can I get a report on average handle time, or get, just spit it out. What is it you're trying to do? All in the back of my mind, of course. I've never spoken to an executive like that in my life, but hopefully if you're a WFM person, you can relate, and you know what I'm talking about here. But the executive stuff can be tricky, which is why often executive reporting or dashboards for executives are kind of generally handled by the most senior people in your WFM team, because maybe they've got special powers to interpret what it is they mean. Okay, so let me see if there's anything else on here. No, and I see we've made good time again, so we're at about 34 minutes, which is fantastic. So yeah, episode 7, reporting. I don't know yet what we're going to talk about next week, but I will figure it out, and hopefully it'll be interesting. But I'm going to leave you there, and as always, if you have any questions or comments or feedback, or if you want to subscribe and follow the podcast, or you want to share it with your friends, please do. I would be very, very grateful. I'm going to leave it there. I will talk to you again next week. See you later.